Get a load of him. 400 pounds of pure muscle. Been fighting me all morning. Look at that whisker.
That's
beautiful
insane,
fish. Yeah, worth every blister. I'm shaking. What a day.
12 feet of pure muscle, 400 pounds of raw power, a head as wide as a man's shoulders, whiskers thick as pencils, trailing through the black water like serpents. This is the Piraiba, the Goliath catfish, the river monster that haunts the deepest channels of the Amazon. A living dinosaur that can swallow a 20-pound fish whole. A predator so powerful it can drag a 14-foot kayak a full kilometer downstream. A beast that breaks steel hooks like toothpicks and snaps 200-pound test line like sewing thread. For decades, fishermen armed with the latest technology had tried to land one of these giants. Carbon fiber rods worth thousands of dollars, high-tech reels with computerized drag systems, stainless steel hooks engineered to withstand 600 pounds of pressure. All of them failed. But on February 4th, 2023, in the dark waters of the Rio Negro, a 60-year-old fisherman named João da Silva did what no one else could. He landed a 401-pound Piraiba. Not with modern technology, not with expensive equipment, but with a piece of bone, a length of natural fiber, and a knowledge that stretched back 9,000 years.
He's running. Keep the tip high. Keep it high.
I'm trying. He's pulling me
Watch
down.
that drag. He's under us.
There he is. Big swirl.
Hold on.
Line's going. Line's going.
Snap. Damn it.
I'm still on him. He's out there thrashing.
Keep pressure. Keep pressure. Don't give him slack.
Dragging hard. He's diving again.
My God, look at you. 12 feet of pure muscle. Worth every pull. We did it.
This is the story of how ancient wisdom defeated modern engineering, and how a primitive hook proved that sometimes the oldest solutions are the strongest. The morning sun barely kissed the horizon of the Rio Negro, painting the dark water with shades of orange and purple. The air, thick and humid, vibrated with the chorus of the awakening jungle. But in the small wooden canoe, the silence was tense, sacred. João da Silva, a man of 60 whose skin was a map of decades under the Amazonian sun, didn't move. His hands, calloused and strong, held a thick line of tucum fiber. It wasn't a modern fishing rod. It was tradition in his hands. The line tensed, not with a jerk, but with a slow, massive weight. A weight that seemed to want to drag the entire world into the depths. João held on, his nudillos white. Sweat beaded on his forehead. This was the moment. The fish that had obsessed his thoughts, the monster of local legends, was on the other side. The line vibrated, a low guttural moan resonating through the fiber. And then, with a jolt that nearly tore him from the canoe, the line went slack. The weight disappeared. Silence. Only the beating of his own heart in his ears. The monster was gone, again. But this time, something had changed in João's eyes. It wasn't defeat. It was a determination forged in the fire of obsession. This time, he wouldn't let it escape. The Rio Negro, a tributary of the Amazon, whose name comes from its dark, tannin-stained waters, has been the cradle of countless legends. From its birth in Colombia to its meeting with the Solimões, to form the mighty Amazon near Manaus, Brazil, its depths have hidden mysteries. The river stretches approximately 2,250 kilometers, making it one of the largest rivers in the world. During the dry season, which peaks between September and February, the river shrinks. The waters recede, revealing white sand beaches and concentrating aquatic life in deeper channels. It's a time of abundance for fishermen, but it's also the time when monsters come out to play. In the community of Santa Isabel do Rio Negro, more than 600 kilometers from Manaus, stories of a giant piraiba were more than simple fishermen's tales. They were warnings. A fish so large it had broken the thickest lines, destroyed the most expensive reels, and disappeared into the depths, leaving only the echo of its power. They called it O Fantasma, the ghost. During the 2023 fishing season, tension in Santa Isabel was palpable. Fishermen, equipped with the latest technology in carbon fiber rods and high-end reels, returned day after day with stories of frustrating encounters. 200-pound monofilament lines snapped like sewing thread. Lures the size of a forearm were ripped from the lines. One fisherman, Ricardo Mendez, a 32-year-old from Sao Paulo who had invested more than 15,000 reais in his equipment, swore the fish had dragged his 14-foot kayak almost a kilometer downstream before his line broke with a sound like a gunshot. Another fisherman, an American tourist named Mike Thompson, had lost 3 12-euro stainless steel circle hooks in a single week. Hooks that, according to the manufacturer, could withstand up to 600 pounds of pressure. Frustration was turning into a collective obsession. But for João, a riverine whose family had fished these waters for 5 generations, the obsession was personal. He didn't have expensive equipment. His livelihood depended on his knowledge of the river, a knowledge passed from fathers to sons, a living encyclopedia of currents, eddies, and secrets that no GPS could map. His grandfather, João da Silva, had taught him to read the river when he was barely 6 years old. João had felt O Fantasma 3 times in the last 2 weeks. Each time, the same story: a slow, powerful take, unsustainable tension, and then nothing. But João had noticed something that the others, in their eagerness for technology, had overlooked: the way the fish took the bait. It wasn't the violent strike of a hungry predator, it was a deliberate wait, a test of strength, as if the fish were testing the line, looking for a weak point. And it always found one. One afternoon in late January 2023, while the other fishermen cleaned their equipment and cursed their luck on the small wooden dock, João watched silently from his canoe. Ricardo, with his latest generation carbon fiber rod resting on his shoulder, mocked good-naturedly. "Any luck, old man? Or did the ghost laugh at your fishing line, too?" The other fisherman laughed. It was a recurring joke. João, with his handline and worn canoe, was seen as a relic of the past, an anachronism in a world of cutting-edge technology. João didn't respond. Immediately, his eyes were fixed on a distant point on the river, where the water swirled in a particular way. Then he turned to Ricardo with a calm that contrasted with the young man's frustration. "The problem isn't the line," he said quietly. "It's the hook." Ricardo frowned. "The hook? I use the strongest circle hooks on the market, 12-euro stainless steel. You could lift a car with one of those." João slowly shook his head. "Steel is strong, yes, but it's rigid, brittle. When a fish of that size and power turns, the pressure at a small point is immense. Steel doesn't yield. It breaks." Mike Thompson, the American, approached, intrigued. "Are you saying steel is too strong?" "I'm saying steel isn't flexible," João responded. "A fish like the ghost doesn't fight like small fish. It doesn't pull in one direction. It turns, twists, changes direction in an instant. Each change creates a point of extreme pressure on the hook. Steel resists, 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 and then it breaks." The other fisherman laughed. The idea that an old fisherman with a handline could know more than the engineers who designed their $1,000 equipment was absurd. But João paid them no attention. In his mind, an idea was forming, an idea born from his grandfather's stories. Stories of a time before steel and monofilament, a time when hooks weren't bought in stores, but created from the jungle itself. That night, while the full moon rose over the jungle, João didn't sleep. He ventured into the darkness, not toward the river, but toward the village cemetery, an ancient place where wooden crosses leaned with the weight of years. With due respect, he knelt before an ancestor's grave, a place his family had tended for generations. From a small leather bag, he took out simple tools, a sharp knife, a piece of sandstone, and a primitive hand drill. With utmost care, he unearthed a long, thick bone that had been placed there for that purpose generations ago. It was a tapir femur, a sacred and powerful animal in his people's cosmology. The tapir, the largest terrestrial mammal in South America, can weigh up to 300 kilograms. Its bones are dense and strong, but they also have an inherent flexibility that steel doesn't possess. Back in his cabin, by the light of a kerosene lamp, he began the work. It wasn't the first time he'd made a bone hook. His grandfather had taught him the technique when he was just a child, more as a history lesson than a practical skill. But now, each movement had a renewed purpose. With the knife, he began to carve the bone, not in the curved shape of a modern hook, but in a straighter, double-pointed form, a design that went back thousands of years to the first hooks used by Paleolithic man. This type of hook, known as a gorge hook or spindle hook, was used by ancient cultures around the world. In Norway, bone hooks of this type dating back 7,000 to 8,000 years have been found in the Vistahulin caves. In Palestine, a bone hook approximately 9,000 years old was discovered. The shape was crucial. It wasn't designed to hook the fish in the mouth, but to be swallowed, and then, when pulling the line, to turn and lodge in the throat or stomach. It was a technique that required patience and an intimate knowledge of fish behavior. For hours, the only sound was the rhythmic scraping of the knife against bone. João worked with meticulous precision, carving the bone into a double-pointed shape, approximately 15 centimeters long. Each end had to be perfectly sharpened, but not so fine as to break. Then he began the slow process of sharpening the points with the sandstone, periodically wetting it in a bowl of river water to keep it cool. Finally, with the hand drill, he bored a small hole in the exact center of the hook to tie the line. This hole had to be perfectly centered so the hook would rotate correctly once inside the fish. At dawn on February 3, 2023, the hook was finished. It was about 15 centimeters long, white as ivory, with 2 deadly sharp points. It wasn't pretty like shiny steel hooks. It was a primitive tool, brutal in its simplicity. But João held it in the palm of his hand and felt a connection he had never felt with a metal hook. It was a piece of history, a legacy from his ancestors, and his secret weapon in the hunt for O Phantasma. The next day, February 4th, at the dock, the mockery intensified. When João showed his bone hook to the other fishermen, laughter echoed across the river. "You're going to hunt a monster with a bone?" Ricardo mocked. "Maybe you should use a spear like cavemen." Mike Thompson shook his head in disbelief. "Dude, that's a museum artifact. It won't withstand 1/10 of the pressure my steel hooks can handle." Another fisherman, a Brazilian from Manaus named Carlos, took the hook in his hands, examining it with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "It's interesting, João, but this is 2023, not the Stone Age. Steel exists for a reason." João didn't argue. He simply nodded, a slight smile on his lips. He knew that bone, unlike steel, had an inherent flexibility. It could bend under pressure, absorb the impact of a violent jerk, and distribute force along its structure. It wouldn't break, it would adapt. He connected the hook to his tucum fiber line, an incredibly strong natural fiber he had twisted and waxed himself. Tucum fiber, extracted from the Astracarium aculeatum palm, has been used by indigenous peoples of the Amazon for centuries. When twisted correctly and waxed with copaiba resin, it can withstand up to 300 pounds of pressure without breaking. João had prepared 50 meters of this line, enough to allow a large fish to run without breaking the connection. As bait, he didn't use the brightly colored artificial lures the others preferred. He used a whole fish, a pacu weighing almost 5 kilos, hooked in such a way that it completely hid the bone hook. The pacu, with its fatty flesh and strong smell, was known to attract large catfish. His plan was simple but required immense patience. Let O Phantasma swallow the bait completely, wait the exact time for the fish to begin digesting, and then, at just the right moment, pull the line with constant force so the hook would turn and lodge. It was a game of patience, not brute force. As he rowed toward his secret spot, a deep eddy where two currents met near the confluence with the Rio Branco, he felt the weight of the other fishermen's gazes. They were looks of pity, of condescension, but to João, he was the guardian of forgotten knowledge, knowledge that was about to be tested against the most powerful creature in the Rio Negro. The sun was at its highest point when João reached his spot. The heat was suffocating. The river was calm, the water dark as oil. This place, which João called a Boca do Diabo, the devil's mouth, was a deep depression in the riverbed where the currents of the Negro and Branco met and created a perpetual eddy. His grandfather had told him that in this place the largest fish in the river came to feed. João dropped his bait, feeling the weight of the pacu descend slowly into the depths. He counted in his mind 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters. Finally, at about 40 meters, he felt the bait touch bottom. He lifted the line slightly, leaving the bait suspended a meter from the riverbed. And he waited. An hour passed, then 2. The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon. Other fishing boats passed in the distance, but João didn't flinch. His eyes never left the point where his line disappeared into the depths. At 4:37 in the afternoon, according to the old pocket watch that had belonged to his grandfather, it happened. The line tensed, slowly, deliberately, the same massive weight he had felt before. But this time João didn't react. He let the line slide between his fingers, allowing the fish to take the bait, to swallow it. He waited, counting the seconds in his head, an eternity of tension. 1, 2, 3. His heart pounded in his chest. 4, 5, 6. He could feel the weight moving. 7, 8, 9, 10. Now! With a fluid, powerful movement, he pulled the line, not with a sharp jerk, but with constant, increasing pressure. The response was instantaneous. All hell broke loose. The water exploded in an eruption of white foam. The river's surface broke, and for the first time João saw his adversary. It was bigger than he had ever imagined. A leviathan from the depths, a piraiba of mythical proportions. Its head was as wide as a man's shoulders, its whiskers, long and thick as pencils, thrashed with fury. Its body, a silvery gray that shone in the sunlight, arched in the air, revealing a length of more than 3 meters. The fish weighed, João knew instinctively, more than 180 kilograms. Then it dove, and the real battle began. The fish ran, dragging João's canoe like it was a toy. Water hissed against the bow. João held on, the tucum line cutting into his calloused hands. The fish dove deep, trying to snag the line on submerged logs at the river bottom. João knew every one of those obstacles. Using the pressure of the line and the movement of his canoe, he guided the fish away from danger. The battle went on for hours. The sun began to descend, staining the sky red and orange. João's muscles burned, his arms trembled with effort, his hands bled, the blood mixing with the river water splashing the canoe. But he didn't yield. The tucum line held firm, and the bone hook, buried in the giant's entrails, didn't break. It was a brutal dance between man and beast, a test of endurance and will. The fish jumped, twisted, tried to free itself with a force that seemed supernatural. At one point, the Piraiba leaped completely out of the water, its massive body suspended in the air for an instant that seemed like an eternity. João could see every detail, the silvery scales, the small dark eyes, the enormous mouth capable of swallowing a 20-kilo fish whole. Then the fish fell back into the water with a crash that resonated like thunder. The shock wave nearly capsized the canoe. But João held on, his body and mind focused on a single purpose. At 7:15 in the evening, after almost 3 hours of battle, the fish began to tire. Its runs grew shorter, its jumps less frequent. João, sensing the change, began to gain line, centimeter by centimeter. It was a slow, painful process. Each meter gained was a victory. Darkness had fallen when he finally brought the giant close to his canoe. The fish lay on the surface, its enormous body gleaming in the light of the full moon. It was exhausted, but not defeated. Its eyes seemed to look at João with a mixture of fury and respect. News of the battle had spread across the river like wildfire. The other fishermen, drawn by the commotion, had approached in their boats, keeping a respectful distance. They watched in silence, their faces illuminated by the flashlights of their phones as João fought the giant. What they saw left them breathless. It wasn't just the size of the fish, which far exceeded anything they had ever seen. It was the image of a man, alone in his small canoe, fighting a force of nature with nothing more than a handline and a piece of bone. The mockery had vanished, replaced by silent awe. Ricardo watched with wide eyes, his expensive fishing rod forgotten at his side. The American tourist filmed with his phone, murmuring, "Incredible," over and over. Carlos had tears in his eyes. When João finally secured the fish next to his canoe, a murmur of admiration ran through the flotilla of spectators. With the help of 2 other strong fishermen, they towed the giant to shore. On the white sand beach, by the light of bonfires the villagers had lit, the true magnitude of the catch became evident. The Piraiba measured 3.6 meters long from the tip of its snout to the end of its caudal fin. Its circumference at the widest part was 1.8 meters. When they weighed it on an industrial scale borrowed from a local merchant, the needle stopped at 182 kilograms, 401 pounds. It was a new unofficial record for the Rio Negro, surpassing the previous record of 138 kilograms recorded in the Ictio app in May 2019. A record set not with cutting-edge technology, but with ancestral wisdom. João, exhausted but triumphant, sat next to his catch, his hand resting on the fish's rough skin. There was no joy on his face, but a deep sense of respect and connection. He had hunted the ghost, but he had also honored his ancestors. Ricardo approached João, arrogance replaced by genuine humility. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I laughed at you, but that was the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life." He extended his hand. João took it, and in that handshake, A generational and cultural gap closed. Ancient knowledge and modern technology met not as rivals, but as complements. The bone hook, carefully recovered from the fish's stomach, was intact. Worn, yes, with marks from stomach acids, but not broken. It had proven its worth. The capture of the giant piraiba became a legend in the Amazon, but its impact went far beyond a simple fishing record. For the fishermen of Santa Isabel do Rio Negro, it was a lesson in humility. They learned that technology, no matter how advanced, cannot replace deep knowledge of the river and its creatures. They began to listen more to the old fishermen, to pay attention to the signs of the water, the wind, the behavior of animals. Ricardo sold part of his high-tech equipment and asked João to teach him how to make tucum lines and read the river. During the following months, João became an involuntary teacher, teaching a new generation of fishermen the techniques his grandfather had taught him. He showed them how to identify tucum palms, how to extract the fibers, how to twist them into strong lines. He taught them to carve bone hooks, though most opted to use bones from legally hunted animals. The American tourist, Mike Thompson, shared his video on social media, and the story of João and his primitive hook went viral. The video accumulated more than 5 million views on YouTube in the first 2 weeks. Fishermen from around the world began experimenting with bone hooks and natural lines. A fisherman in Alaska caught a 200-pound halibut using a bone hook carved according to the traditional Tlingit design. In Peru, fishermen from Lake Titicaca revived the ancient bone hook technique their ancestors had used for centuries. The story inspired fishermen worldwide to look beyond their equipment catalogs and explore the traditional techniques of their own regions. João's bone hook was never used for fishing again. It was placed in a small wooden box in the village community center, a tangible reminder of the power of ancestral knowledge. It became a symbol that in the struggle for survival, sometimes the most powerful tool isn't the newest, but the wisest. In March 2024, exactly 1 year after the capture, the community of Santa Isabel do Rio Negro organized the first traditional fishing knowledge festival. Fishermen from across the Amazon basin gathered to share techniques, stories, and wisdom. João was the guest of honor, and his bone hook was exhibited as the centerpiece of the festival. The months following the historic catch brought profound changes to Santa Isabel do Rio Negro. The community began to rediscover its roots. João's cabin transformed into an informal school. Each afternoon, young fishermen gathered around his fire to listen and learn. Ricardo was the first to arrive, but he was soon followed by others. Carlos brought his 16-year-old son, Diego. "I want him to learn what I never learned," he told João. The lessons weren't just about fishing. João taught a complete philosophy of living in harmony with the river. "The river isn't our enemy," he would say, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "It's our teacher. It gives us everything we need if we learn to listen." He showed them how the moon phase affected fish behavior. He taught them to read the currents. He showed them how to identify different species of palms that produced useful fibers. But the most important lesson was about respect. "When you take a large fish," João explained, "you're taking years of life from the river. A 180-kilogram piraiba can be 30 or 40 years old. It deserves respect." This philosophy resonated deeply with the younger fishermen. They began practicing catch and release for the largest fish. In June 2023, 4 months after the capture of the ghost, Ricardo caught his first large piraiba using João's techniques. It was a 95-kilogram fish, huge by normal standards, but Ricardo didn't weigh it on a scale or photograph it for social media. He simply held it in the water for a few minutes, allowing fresh water to flow through its gills. Then he released it. "Thank you, old master," he murmured. The story of the bone hook also attracted academic attention. In August 2023, a team of anthropologists from the Federal University of Amazonas arrived in Santa Isabel. Dr. Marina Santos, the team leader, was fascinated by João's hook. "This design is practically identical to Paleolithic hooks found in Europe," she explained. "It's knowledge that has survived thousands of years." They took precise measurements of the hook. Total length, 14.7 centimeters, diameter at the thickest point, 1.2 centimeters, angle of the points, 22 degrees from the central axis, position of the tying hole, exactly at the geometric center. "The precision is astonishing," said Dr. Santos. Without modern measuring instruments, João created a perfectly balanced hook. This isn't luck. It's knowledge transmitted through generations. The findings were published in the Journal of Traditional Ecological Knowledge in November 2023. The article, titled Paleolithic Technology in the Modern Amazon, a case study of traditional fishing knowledge, became one of the most cited of the year. In December 2023, the community of Santa Isabel officially established the João da Silva Traditional Fishing School, named in honor of João's grandfather. João was named honorary director. The school had no formal buildings. Classes were held on the river, in canoes, under jungle trees. But it had a formal curriculum, developed with the help of the anthropologists. Module 1, Reading the River, Currents, Eddies, and Natural Signs. Module 2, Traditional Tool Making, Hooks, Lines, and Nets. Module 3, Fish Behavior, Lunar Cycles, Seasons, and Feeding Patterns. Module 4, Fishing Ethics, Sustainability and Respect for the River. Module 5, Plant Knowledge, Identification and Use of Natural Resources. In the first year, the school graduated 22 students. Diego became João's closest apprentice. He spent every day after school in João's canoe, learning every detail. In March 2024, exactly 1 year after the capture of the ghost, Diego carved his first bone hook. It was smaller than João's, designed for medium fish rather than giants. But it was perfectly balanced, the points sharpened with precision. João examined it with pride. "Your grandfather would be proud," he told Diego. Then he corrected himself. "Your great-grandfather, because now you're part of this lineage." The story of the bone hook also inspired changes in fishing policy. In January 2024, the government of Amazonas state established new regulations. Piraíbas over 150 kilograms were declared living treasures of the river. Their capture was permitted, but only with mandatory release. Penalties for killing a giant piraíba were severe, up to 50,000 reais. But more important than the fines was the cultural change. Fishermen began to see large fish not as trophies, but as patriarchs of the river. Catching one was an honor, but releasing it was an act of respect. João's bone hook, exhibited in the community center, became a pilgrimage site. Fishermen from across the Amazon basin came to see it. The community center became a living museum of traditional fishing knowledge. On the walls, photographs documented the history, but the most moving exhibit was a simple glass case. Inside, João's bone hook rested on a red velvet cushion. Beside it, an engraved bronze plaque. This hook, carved from tapir bone according to techniques dating back 9,000 years, caught a 182-kilogram piraíba in the Rio Negro on February 4, 2023. It represents not only a fishing feat, but the preservation of ancestral knowledge in a modern world. May it inspire future generations to honor the wisdom of their ancestors. João's story isn't just a fishing story, it's a testament to the power of traditional knowledge. In a world dominated by technology, it's a reminder that innovation doesn't always mean creating something new. Sometimes it means rediscovering what we already knew. In the depths of the Rio Negro, the ghost still swims. Its scars, where the bone hook briefly lodged, have healed. But the encounter left a mark on both. On the fish, a story of survival. On the man, a renewal of faith in ancestral wisdom. And in the dark waters of the Amazon, where the secrets of the past and the promises of the future meet, the legacy continues, one tucum line at a time, one bone hook at a time, one lesson at a time. The river flows on, the fish swim on, the knowledge passes on. The Piraiba, after being weighed and photographed, was returned to the river. João insisted on it. "This fish has lived many years," he said. "It has survived floods, droughts, predators. It deserves to live the rest of its days in peace." With the help of several fishermen, they carried the giant back to the water. For a moment, the fish remained motionless, as if disoriented. Then, with a powerful movement of its tail, it dove into the dark depths of the Rio Negro and disappeared. But its legacy, and the legacy of the bone hook that caught it, will remain forever in the waters of the Amazon. On the one-year anniversary of the catch, February 4th, 2024, João returned to the Devil's Mouth. Not to fish, to remember. He sat in his canoe, the same canoe that had been dragged by the ghost, and watched the water. The river was different now, lower. The dry season was more severe than it had been in decades. Climate change was altering the Amazon's rhythms. But the river still flowed, the fish still swam, life persisted. Diego joined him in the canoe. The young man had grown in the past year, not just in skill, but in understanding. "Do you think the ghost is still out there?" Diego asked. João smiled. "I know it is. I can feel it." "Will you try to catch it again?" João shook his head. "No. We had our battle. It was enough." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against the canoe. Then Diego spoke again. "What did you learn from the ghost?" João thought for a long moment. "I learned that the river always teaches if we're willing to listen. I learned that our ancestors weren't primitive. They were wise. They understood things we're only now rediscovering. And I learned that the strongest tools aren't always made of steel. Sometimes they're made of patience, of respect, of connection to the natural world." He paused, his eyes distant. "But most importantly, I learned that when we honor the past, we create a better future." Diego nodded, understanding. In his pocket, he carried a small bone hook he had carved. Not for fishing, for remembering. A reminder that he was part of a lineage stretching back thousands of years. A lineage of men and women who had lived in harmony with the river, who had taken only what they needed, who had respected the creatures they hunted, who had passed their knowledge to the next generation. And now, he was part of that chain, a link between the ancient past and the uncertain future. The success of João's bone hook wasn't just tradition, it was physics. When Dr. Roberto Ferreira from the Federal University of Amazonas analyzed the hook, he discovered something remarkable. The bone's molecular structure contained microscopic channels that gave it flexibility. Under extreme pressure, these channels allowed the bone to compress slightly, distributing force across its entire surface. Steel, in contrast, concentrated pressure at specific points. When a 400-pound Piraiba twisted violently, a steel hook experienced point loading. All that force focused on a single molecular bond, and eventually that bond would fail. The bone hook experienced distributed loading. The force spread across thousands of microscopic channels. Dr. Ferreira conducted laboratory tests. The steel hooks, rated for 600 pounds, failed at 547 pounds when subjected to rapid directional changes. The bone hook withstood over 650 pounds with directional changes. We've been so focused on tensile strength that we forgot about dynamic flexibility, Dr. Ferreira explained. In a real fishing scenario, flexibility matters more than raw strength. The Tucum line showed similar properties. Modern monofilament fails catastrophically. When it breaks completely and instantly. The Tucum line, composed of hundreds of individual fibers, failed progressively. If one fiber broke, the others held. João's line could lose up to 30% of its fibers and still function. Monofilament couldn't lose even 1%. Indigenous peoples of the Amazon figured this out thousands of years ago, noted Dr. Ferreira. The research team found nearly identical hooks in archaeological sites across the world. In Czechoslovakia, hooks from 30,000 years ago. In Palestine, 9,000 years old. In Norway's Vistahulin caves, 7,000 to 8,000 years old. The design had survived because it worked. For tens of thousands of years, this design had fed families and sustained communities. And on February 4, 2023, it proved once again why it had survived for millennia. The Piraiba that João caught wasn't just large, it was ancient. Dr. Marina Santos and her team analyzed scale samples from the fish. The results were stunning. The fish was estimated to be 43 years old. It had been born in 1980. It had survived the construction of the Girau and Santo Antonio dams in 2008 and 2011. It had evaded countless fishermen for more than 4 decades. The Piraiba, scientifically known as Brachyplatystoma filamentosum, is the largest catfish in the Amazon. Adults typically measure 2 to 2.5 meters and weigh over 150 kilograms. Exceptional specimens can exceed 3.6 meters and 200 kilograms. The species is a long-distance migratory predator, traveling thousands of kilometers from headwaters to estuaries. Local legends say the Piraiba is the mother of all fish. Some indigenous communities believe it's a sacred creature, a guardian of the river's deepest secrets. A 400-pound Piraiba is a formidable predator. Its mouth can open wide enough to swallow a 20-kilogram fish whole. It was an apex predator, the king of its domain. And yet, it had met its match in a 60-year-old man with a piece of bone. The video Mike Thompson posted went viral beyond anyone's expectations. Within a month, it had been viewed over 15 million times. It was shared by fishing channels, survival channels, and even mainstream news outlets. The BBC did a feature story. National Geographic sent a photographer. João, who had never owned a smartphone and barely understood the internet, suddenly found himself famous. But the fame brought something more valuable than celebrity. It brought a global conversation about traditional knowledge. Fishermen from around the world began sharing their own traditional techniques. In Japan, elderly fishermen demonstrated ancient ayu fishing using trained cormorant birds. In Scotland, gillies showed traditional salmon fly tying unchanged since the 1800s. In New Zealand, Maori fishermen shared the art of carving matau hooks from bone. In Alaska, Tlingit elders demonstrated halibut hook carving passed down for generations. Each culture had its own wisdom. A movement began. not a rejection of modern technology, but a synthesis. Fishermen started combining the best of both worlds. Modern fish finders to locate fish, but traditional techniques to catch them. Traditional knowledge to understand fish behavior, modern materials for durability. In November 2023, the International Traditional Fishing Knowledge Conference was held in Manaus. Over 500 attendees from 47 countries. João was the keynote speaker. He stood on stage, a simple riverine fisherman in front of an audience of scientists, conservationists, and fishing industry leaders. He didn't have a PowerPoint presentation. He didn't have notes. He simply told his story. And when he finished, the audience gave him a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. "We've spent billions of dollars developing fishing technology," said Dr. James Morrison, a marine biologist from Australia. "And a 60-year-old man with a bone hook just taught us that we've been thinking about the problem wrong." The conference resulted in the Manaus Declaration, a commitment by fishing organizations worldwide to document and preserve traditional fishing knowledge. Funding was allocated for oral history projects in fishing communities. Universities established programs to study traditional techniques scientifically. Museums created exhibits showcasing traditional fishing tools and methods. And at the center of it all was João's bone hook, now recognized as a symbol of the enduring value of ancestral wisdom. In April 2024, the Brazilian Ministry of Culture declared João's bone hook a National Cultural Heritage item. It was the first fishing tool ever to receive such designation. The ceremony was held in Santa Isabel do Rio Negro. Government officials, anthropologists, and fishing community representatives gathered on the banks of the Rio Negro. The Minister of Culture spoke to the assembled crowd. "This hook represents more than a fishing tool. It represents the wisdom of our ancestors. It represents the knowledge that indigenous and riverine communities have preserved for millennia. It reminds us that sometimes the future is found in the past." João, uncomfortable with the attention, simply nodded. But when he spoke, his words resonated with everyone present. "I didn't do anything special. I just remembered what my grandfather taught me." The real heroes are the generations of fishermen who came before me. I'm just a link in that chain, and I hope there will be many more links after me. The crowd erupted in applause, and in that moment, on the banks of the Rio Negro, a bridge was built between past and future. As the sun set over the Rio Negro, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson, João and Diego paddled back to the village. Behind them, in the depths of the Devil's Mouth, something massive stirred, a shadow in the darkness. The ghost, still swimming, still surviving, a living testament to the enduring power of the wild. And, in the village, in a glass case in the community center, a bone hook rested, silent, simple, eternal. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapons are the ones forged not in factories, but in the fires of tradition, not with machines, but with hands, not with technology, but with wisdom. The river flows on, the fish swim on, the knowledge passes on, and in the heart of the Amazon, where the ancient and the modern meet, the legacy of the bone hook endures. One tucum line at a time, one bone hook at a time, one lesson at a time, and those who learn to listen to the river never fish alone.